Yes, Rudhamji.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this session, Harmonizing Minds, Business, Psychology, and Spirituality. We are really excited to have Anshul ji with us. She's known as the ModMonk. And maybe I'll just start by asking you, Anshul ji, a little bit about your background and how you bring together these otherwise separate areas of psychology, spirituality, business, and a little bit about your journey to begin.
Thank you, Binduji. Thank you for having me. I'm on the platform. Well, interestingly, when you say different aspects together, right? I really feel they're not very different aspects. They are layered on one another. So business and psychology are very much connected to each other. Without understanding human psyche, without understanding how humans behave, because businesses are made out of people. People are having their own psychology. They work with a particular way. They come with a particular understanding. They have a particular response or reaction to something. So they're very much, very, very intertwined. And when you look at spirituality, it's about understanding yourself. Again, it kind of boils down to understanding what the psyche of an individual is. You cannot really know yourself without questioning yourself. And the whole journey of questioning is spirituality. So, coming back to the first part of your question, my journey began very young when I was 11, 12 years in spirituality. Post that, I have trained myself in different areas in business, in psychology, in marketing and advertising. And because my pull was towards individual development, spiritual development, really understanding. Now, when I say spirituality, I think we need to use the word a little carefully. I usually use the word adhyatma, which looks at atma ka adhyayan, which looks at understanding yourself, studying about yourself, and that's education. That's knowing yourself is education. So when you know yourself very well, and that is my journey to build the bridge between the modern world, the corporate world, and the spiritual aspect. However, they are not very different. They are layered on one another. You just need to understand where where the water is seeping in and how we can kind of use that entire holistic land to get a fertile workplace, a workspace, spirituality, or better work. I think it kind of blends very well. It's not three different areas as per how I see it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing this session for AIMA YLC. To our 130 plus participants, if any of you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll go through them over the course of this conversation. I wanted to ask you, how do you think that integrating these, as you said, they're all related. How do you think that integrating spirituality into business practices can help create a more effective environment for employees and team members? How can it increase well-being in the workplace, productivity, and how do you see that?
So, like I was telling you, they're not very different. But when you look at spirituality per se and integrating it into business practices on a daily basis, now we're talking about very practical aspects. When we look at knowing, understanding self, we look at understanding your emotions, understanding where you're coming from, what you really are focusing on in terms of driving a business. When you look at those areas, you kind of boil down to knowing who you are. That kind of brings you to a very compassionate, very empathetic sense of being. When you look at yourself with empathy and compassion, and that's what spirituality does, it looks at yourself without judgment, without really questioning or putting fingers on somebody else as to why they're saying what they're saying, and specifically individuals as themselves. When you look at that, you kind of get a broader sense of holistic approach towards a business. And when you integrate empathy and compassion and gratitude, and let's say when we look at being mindful about something, that's a huge part of going on the spiritual journey, is really becoming more mindful, really becoming aware of what is happening. When you integrate those aspects, you get a better productivity, you get efficiency because your decision making is improved. You get focused on a particular point. Let's say you're doing something and you're doing that completely engrossed in that moment. When you decide, or you're in a strategic meeting or a decision making aspect, you are letting go of your preconceived notions about other people, other team members, and you kind of bring them together instead of kind of pushing them on the side, saying that they're different people. When you look at those aspects, you get high amount of productivity in your work, because you're kind of more focused in that area. When you look at gratitude, you kind of let people in. You get a better rate of retention of your employees. You get a better creative aspect, because when you are thinking spiritually, and I'm again going to use the sorry, I'm again going to use the word spiritually because there's no better way to say it in English than the word spirituality. Um, you kind of open many areas because you kind of drop the consciously drop the veil of judgment, or how particular thing will be, or it should be in a particular way. You don't you don't put yourself in those boxes of what shoulds and what should nots, with the aspect of let's call it dharma, or call it righteousness, or call it right living. Whatever area you put it, you kind of bring yourself into that zone of looking at your work, your people, in that, through that lens. And when that happens, when you integrate that, you're naturally going to get better results in creative thinking, because you kind of opened up many aspects. You're going to get better relationships, better communication, better productivity, better efficiency. All of those things, when you put together, I think that's how businesses will actually grow. Um, you cannot see, it may not be like, a revenue straight change, because that's human, that's nature, that's how individuals are. It's not numbers. But over the period of time, you will see a very sustainable change in people's behavior. And when you introduce these areas, even if you say a regular breathing practice, anchoring yourself before you begin a meeting, because we're all busy with thinking so many things when we enter a boardroom or a conference room. You
Right.
have something going on, everything, have a list of meetings that you need to do, or a calls that you need to attend, or a list of emails you need to send. We're coming in with all of that baggage. And humans, you cannot say that you can leave your emotions back at home, because you're human beings. You really cannot segregate those emotions. There was a time before, like a couple of years back, maybe a decade or two, they used to say, leave your emotions outside the office,
Right.
right? And that doesn't happen. And it cannot happen because you're human beings. You bring yourself. So when we look at spiritual practices, it kind of anchors you down. It kind of brings you in the present moment. It kind of blurs out everything around you to just focus on what you're doing, with compassion, with empathy, with gratitude, with understanding, with non-judgmental behavior. And that will naturally, even if that comes into our daily lives, it's going to become it's going to improve our daily productivity, and so will it improve businesses, and it will help people grow, individuals grow.
That's beautiful. Can you give me an example just to kind of help us understand of an organization that you've worked with, and sort of what are the challenges that they may have been facing, and what practices you help them incorporate, and sort of the end result that you see from that? Understanding, of course, that it is a process and it's not just
Sure.
an overnight.
Sure. So I have worked with many organizations, including corporates, including universities. So a lot of times what we face is stress, and stress not related to just work stress, but it's related to personal stress. It's related to uh, wanting to prove yourself. It's very difficult for individuals today in the modern world to slow down the process. We want to do things very, very fast, and so one of the sessions that we've had with corporates and continuously been having is slowing the process down, understanding a blueprint of an individual.
Hmm.
So what we do is in that program is we try to get a timeline of your lifetime. Now, it might seem like it's a very personal exercise, but it's based on personal, professional, and spiritual levels. Very much on a professional level, when you talk in an organization, that this is what we did. We opened up a timeline. It was, I will tell you which, it was an organization in Ahmedabad, the last one that we were doing. We opened up a timeline to understand what really happened in different parts of your life. So it can be like a child, it can be to teenage, then it can be, your adult age, and of course, whatever age group that they are in right now, to understand most important areas, most important uh, places that they feel stuck in. And when you look at those things, what we do is we integrate breathing, just getting back, anchoring, breathe. And it's such a simple technique, but it is extremely, extremely valuable. Other thing that we did with them is on that timeline, we tried to help them look at everything from a helicopter point of view. Again, it's a very spiritual practice. When we look at 4 areas, how would I see, like you have Johari's window, like the helicopter view is another thing that we look at. How does the situation look to you? How would that situation look to the person, let's say, for example, you in the situation with me? So how would it look to you, and how would that situation look to you? How would that situation look to a third party who is not involved? And how would that situation look to somebody who's a wise person who's got nothing to do with either the 3 of you? But how would it be on a very, from a wisdom point of view? Now, when you step back and look at something like this, integrating being mindful and having breathing exercises with them, you kind of open areas where you can see different results, you can see different reactions, you will see that people will change their decisions. And how it has helped is I've seen relationships within a team change, because you then understand what the other person exactly might be feeling. When you step into somebody else's shoe and try to see where it pinches, it may not be like 100%, but it surely gives you a brief understanding, because that person can come from a different mindset, a different background, a different emotion setup. Then you try to open up and speak to that individual, leaving your judgment and your ego behind, asking what is really going on. Because that moment you're not only stepping back, you're not only anchoring, you're not only breathing and becoming quieter and calmer, but you're also seeing from other perspectives. So decision makings have become better in the team. The connections have become better in the team. And you will see it was a sales oriented team. So the sales have become better because they're working much nicer together. And they have a clear goal of to what they want to do. So sales have become, because that's a number game at the end of the day. Sales particularly is a number game. So that has kind of improved. Even another company, I was working with Tanishq, and it was also a sales team. And even their sales kind of got better. So but again, it's not an instant coffee.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a question from an audience member here. And Tarun asks, in cutthroat competition with so much uncertainty in current times, is it possible to fully practice spirituality in business practices by all employees across all levels? Kindly give some practical examples, tips, and how we can all slow down or remain in the current moment always.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer all of that together. Please tell me if I missed something out in that question. So the first part is, in the cutthroat competition, is it possible for an individual to completely be present and be anchored in spirituality all the time? The answer is yes, but it is your journey. So you have to be very, very sure that you are in that journey and you're consciously becoming aware. There will be times when you kind of fall down, but you have to get up and start walking on that path again. So you have to, maybe that awareness might go off in between. Maybe your conscious setting might go off in between. But in the cutthroat competition, it is not about me becoming better than you. Spirituality is not about that. It's about me becoming better than what I was yesterday, or me understanding myself better, that I can become better as an individual. In the cutthroat competition that we are in, unfortunately, many a times people kind of let this thing slide by. But you have to try as much as you can to stay on the path of self-awareness, of empathy, of understanding, of being mindful of what you're talking. And also to answer that question, when you are consciously mindful about something, you will notice over a period of time that competition will be there and always will be, but it will not affect you as much. That is the answer to your first question. Second, he was asking about practical tips. Binduji?
Yeah, he says, what are some practical tips on how we can all slow down and remain in the moment always?
Wonderful. So I was just writing about this morning. So it's to calm down, to slow your pace. Practical tips to do it is when you probably sit on your desk, just sit down. Don't switch it on. Don't do anything to your computer or your mouse or the keypad. Just sit there and just absorb and completely observe everything around you. It might feel weird in the first go. It surely does feel weird, but over the period of time, it helps you to slow down your process. That is one. Second, it's an everyday practice. So nothing is rocket science. It's everyday single practice that you have to integrate in your life. Simple thing. If you're making a cup of coffee, or if you're, just driving your car to work, in that moment, consciously start slowing your thoughts down. It is not that you're going to lose, or it is not that you are going to fail somewhere or fall, something will happen. Nothing is going to happen if you kind of just step down in your mind consciously. You can make a sacred space, if physical tangibility is what you want to something, and a lot of people need physical tangibility in something. Create a sacred space. So you can create one little corner, even if it's your office desk. Have whatever 2-3 items that you want, you can keep it there, or a window near your bedside, or a chair there, and just sit there. Focus on your breath for 3 minutes. It's not more than that if you want. You want to do it for a longer period of time, you're welcome, but 3 minutes. Consciously, let's say every 3 hours, you've got these water drinking reminders nowadays on mobile phones. I think we should have reminders where you say, take a mindful breath, slow down, stop your thought process, don't try to run around in your head. And there is no A plus B is equal to formula for this. It's a practice. So every time your mind is rushing, say, just breathe, calm down. Okay, let me just think, is this really hampering my productivity? Is this hampering my thought process? Is this hampering my creativity? It is, probably. Breathe. You will get better. Once your mind starts clearing of energies in its head, in its thinking process, it's like a drainage system. You have to clean it, and the thoughts will come in. So I think that is one way you can consciously practice and try to integrate slowing down in your life. It's the art of pausing. You have to pause in between.
Beautiful. And I think many of us don't realize the importance of that pause until we really miss it. So I think that's a very
absolutely. And it's when you breathe also. When you breathe and you breathe in and you breathe out, it's a natural pause in between. There's nature has also given us a pause in between two breaths. So I think we have to integrate that pause in life.
I love that. How does emotional intelligence play a role in all of this, in understanding spirituality and business psychology?
Okay, so funny thing that you asked me this question, because there was a time 20 years back, people used to talk about IQ. And you needed to have a good IQ. You need to have a good IQ to get a certain job done. But then later came EQ, emotional intelligence, and now SQ, social as well as spiritual quotient. Now, when we look at emotional intelligence, what are we looking at? We're looking at two areas of self-awareness, management, and external awareness and external management. Now, the core of emotional intelligence is using whatever we've learned on an emotional front to manage and to work around with it, to build good teams, to get good relationships, to understand the other person. Now, the basics of EQ, or emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, is self-awareness aspect. That's the model of EQ also. And without understanding emotions, it can be fear, it can be judgment, it can be anger, it can be sadness, it can be guilt, it can be disgust, whatever anger, whatever emotions that we have. If we don't understand these emotions, uncover these things, and there is no way that you're going to be given on a platter that, my emotions are XYZ. We need to uncover these emotions for ourselves. Uncovering these emotions to understand what are the root causes. Now, here comes the layering of spirituality, because it's uncovering again. Understanding what we are, what are the triggers of my emotions, why are they really coming, what is the root cause of it. When I understand, and only when I understand the root cause of something. Let's say for anger, if I don't understand the root cause of why and what is triggering me, anything that I do, anything somebody else will do trigger. The minute I understand the trigger of my emotion, it's a natural way of it to diminish, because then you've understood the root. You will never repeat it again.
Yeah.
So when you understand the root cause of your, let's say, anger or any emotion, you're able to understand it. So understanding an emotion and to understand an emotion are two different things. Okay, so figuring out what the emotion, then you understand the emotion, you uncover it, understand the root cause of it, see how you're reacting or responding to something. And that is called self-awareness, self-exploration, self-discovery, and opening up the layers of your individuality. Now, these are all parts of EQ. That's the first area of what emotional intelligence teaches you, layered with spirituality. Because uncovering and understanding the root cause is spirituality. And then accepting it with non-judgmental behavior, accepting it with empathy and compassion towards yourself, forgiveness towards yourself. And when you do that, then you move to managing those emotions. And when you are able to understand and manage your own emotions, emotional intelligence, which looks at managing the emotions for the other person involved in a team or otherwise. That's what EI does. It helps you to understand your emotions, yours and the other person, so that you kind of work well together. Once you've uncovered yours with techniques, you can then, when you have identified, you've reflected on it, you have figured out what the emotion is, you have investigated and nurtured it, it will naturally work, improving your emotional quotient in totality. So that's how integration of emotional intelligence, spirituality is a. That's why I started this session when I told you it is not different things. It's a nice layered cake. It's together. It's really not separate. It's only for us to understand what is happening within. So when you are able to do that, self-awareness, breathing, being mindful, you can become very emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent, and of course, that will lead to better relationship, better communication, better decision making, better negotiations, better conflict resolutions, all of that.
Lovely. So Mr. Haq who's the president of the Jalandhar Management Association has a couple of questions. I think you've touched upon one of them before my reading out the question itself, which is how can spirituality in the workplace lead to various positive impacts, specifically like employee morale, productivity, commitment, creativity, and decreased turnover? And then the second part of that is how can young people and how can young India practice the acceptance of failure in life through spirituality? Because failure is something that we all encounter. How does spiritual practice help us deal with that? So both of those questions are from him.
So I'll answer the second question first, because the first one I have touched upon before. Thank you for the question. Young India, the young minds of India. I think he's asking about how you can integrate spirituality in young minds. Is that what his question is? Can you repeat that?
And how can that practice of spirituality help people deal with failure, which is
right? So failure. Like you said, very well said. Failure is a part of our lives, and it happens every day to a lot of people. When you look at, again, going back to the basics of spirituality, we are seeing the whole universe as one, or let's say the whole world as one, or the whole organization as one. or yourself as one, as a part of the network of the bigger chain of people. Now, when we look at ourselves and we see ourselves as one small part of that whole working environment, and we try to understand, so the competition is not there anymore. The basic aspect of understanding and going to a route, the competition kind of starts to diminish away. So you're only working with yourself. When you're working with yourself, I'm sorry, I got distracted with that question. My bad. For failures specifically for individuals and young people, spirituality will help because they will start to understand themselves. They will also start to become more compassionate towards themselves. And failure is only a failure because you kind of push yourself down.
Right.
People look at failure as, I could not do something. I'm not good at this. I'm not good enough. But what mindfulness or spirituality or understanding yourself or uncovering yourself in that journey will do is, it will teach you everything has a learning graph. It will look at life as a pathway. So every time you go, it's like a new signpost where you learn something new. So whatever experiences you've had, spirituality will tell you, go back, look at yourself, look at what you've done, what are your learning curves, what are the lessons that you need to learn, what is that you need to change in yourself, and how do you begin again? Because there is no end. No, it's a circular motion. There is no end to it. A circle doesn't have an end. It kind of rotates itself inside. So when you learn, and that compassion and empathy and love towards yourself will help you learn those lessons and restart your journey. So that is why, that's how failures, or when people kind of lose hope or get discouraged into by doing something, and they give up on things, and that happens a lot with young generation. They give up on things because they do not know how to move forward. But only if they went backward. It's 2 steps back, 4 steps forward method. You take a 2 step back, like I was talking about the helicopter view. Open. It's like dissecting the situation. Spirituality is nothing but dissecting things, non-judgmentally, keeping that aside with the limelight of compassion. So you look at something, you dissect the situation. Why did I fail? What are the learning curves? How will I move forward? And when you take that, I think your failures will become a stepping stone to success.
Lovely. And it's a mindset change, right? You feel
It's
like
a mindset change. Absolutely.
learning process, and you're less competitive with people around you, and you're more working on making yourself better.
And the competition will not exist as much. We have peer pressure. You cannot, I and you, we cannot say that this will not exist, because it is there. The world is going to be there, situations are going to be there, Instagram is going to be there, LinkedIn is going to be there, peer pressure is going to be there. It's how I respond to that particular thing has to change. The switch has to happen internally, not externally. So it's like a radio frequency. If you put your frequency on 98.1, you're going to listen to 98.1. However, whatever songs they're playing on 98.3 will not come to your radio station. So you have to change your frequency for that. Everything else will change. Competition will not reduce. It's you, how you respond to that, how you respond to your failure will change. Sorry. It will not be a failure anymore. It should be looked at as a stepping stone to success.
Right. So Rakesh Setia is asking, in a situation where there's so much time pressure, right? We've talked about peer pressure, and we've talked about, but when there's so much time pressure and we have to achieve so much in such little time, and you think others are unnecessarily talking and wasting time, how do you manage patience? This seems like a very specific challenge here. And many people keep ranting about how their jobs are more complicated and they have to deliver, and they don't appreciate what the other person is going through. So I guess, how do you deal with that?
Okay, this is a huge conversation to have on this, because all of this, what you're talking about, is a challenge many of them are facing in today's world. You're surely under time pressure, and but what happens is, when you're thinking about time pressure, you're actually wasting time. And that's when I say, introducing practice like, let's say, mindfulness, or just, we call it Vishesha Dhyan, which basically means you concentrate on something with a very specific thought process. When you do that, under time pressure, you'll actually notice that your work gets done faster because you are not thinking about how fast I need to do the work. This might sound theoretical to you, but it's actually very practical. When you do it on a daily basis, you'll realize that under time pressure, and time pressure is going to be there. Unfortunately, we're in a very frantic, crazy, um, time eating world, and everybody wants everything very quick, and you're going to be under pressure. But if you try to just focus on what you're doing and practice this technique of anchoring and uh, just focusing, you can put a time clock. 5 minutes, you do what you're doing and don't think about anything else. Then give yourself 30 seconds probably to think something else. And then increase your time. That's what you can practically do to avoid this time pressure aspect that you have. Other than that, of course, you are going to have time pressures. Unfortunately, we work in that kind of a world. But like I said, it's a mindset change. It's not rocket science. It's not that difficult. In fact, it's extremely simple. But it will take a lot of hard work to get there. And his second part of the question was there's a lot of ranting happening. And that's also, I think, he also spoke about patience. How do you have the patience when, a lot of things are going on? Um, the only way to have patience is have patience. It's like, can I have patience? And I want it right now. So that's the jokes apart. But the way to kind of cultivate patience is switching off. And it sounds easy, is difficult. When you try to switch off mentally, if you can think about like a switch in your head, close your eyes, think of a switch in your head and you switch it off, and everything kind of blurs out for you. And to cultivate patience, you just need to see the picture or the situation you're in, take a step back and see the situation. What can be done? The patience usually is lost when you want to do things very fast. What will happen if you don't do it? What will happen if it takes another 3 minutes? What are you going to lose? When you start asking these questions, you will tend to slowly integrate patience in your life. um, and also, patience is another thing that I want to talk about, which is connected to the ranting of somebody else telling that my job is more important than the other person's, or let's say my work is more complicated than yours. Patience and these things are rooted somewhere else. And most often than not, in my years of practice with people and corporate and individuals both, they are rooted in insecurity, which is rooted in fear. So the reason I want to tell you that my job is better than your job is because I want to prove that I'm better off than you. Why do I need to prove that to you? Is because it is somewhere rooted in my insecurity that somewhere at some point I didn't feel as important. So why do I not feel important? What is going to happen is I fear the loss of identity. I fear that if I don't show myself as important or maybe more important than you, then maybe you will not take me more seriously, or maybe I cannot up my game in businesses. So all of these things, and when people are ranting about this, I think what you should do is just smile and walk away, because you cannot change them. Their insecurities they will have to deal with. But if it is triggering you, we need to work with you and to understand why is it triggering you. It can be two things. It can be just general irritation because the person keeps on and on and on, or is it really triggering somewhere in your emotion that you are not liking, and that again brings you to spiritual journey of uncovering yourself. So people ranting about how they are better off and how important or how busy they are, it is rooted with deep rooted psychological, spiritual, and emotional dysfunction.
In what way do you think that, we're talking about at an individual level, this is what each person can do, and that's very useful. But when you come to sort of a leadership role, how do you think spiritual leadership or the spirituality adopted by leadership of an organization can foster a more inclusive and collaborative corporate culture across the board?
Okay. Great question. And I talk a lot about spiritual leadership. You will notice that actual good leaders, not wannabe leaders, good leaders are actually very spiritually oriented. And I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking specifically about being spiritually oriented. They're very self-aware. They're very holistic in nature. They want their people to grow along with them. It is not that they need to have the cake all the time. They're ready to share it across. They are very, very empathetic. Uh, Itself will tell you that it is very inclusive. When you get a leader, or if you um, aspire to be a spiritually awakened or a spiritually motivated as a leader, you need to practice these things of understanding people, letting people in. Again, that will boil down to very basics of first getting to know yourself. Inclusive, it becomes fostering better corporate relationships. It helps in better growth. It becomes a visionary organization, because then a leader is not just thinking about myself. I'm not thinking about just me. I'm thinking about nurturing the whole organization itself. I'm thinking about nurturing and having empathy and compassion towards every individual involved. And when every individual is involved in an organization, it's a very happy organization. And we are actually even checking how much the happiness quotient of an organization or a country even. So it is important for these individuals, these leaders, to be spiritually oriented, to get better corporate culture, to get better inclusivity in terms of employee engagement, to get better relationships across other cultures, because now the world is becoming smaller. So that will really help the holistic aspect of individuals, corporates, as well as leaders who want to grow, and employees involved in it. I'm hoping I've answered your question.
Yeah, so for a leader who might be listening to this and is thinking, okay, this is a really great idea, and I want to do this, what would you recommend as the first few steps that they could possibly implement in their organization or in their leadership style to kind of take steps in the right direction?
Okay. So leadership styles, I think a lot of people, leaders who are here, have probably studied and worked with leadership styles. There are different kinds of styles. There's something called a transformational leadership style that we usually use in organizations and in business setups. For an individual or a leader who is probably present here and who wants to integrate this, it should start from within. First, try to understand what is my style, where do I want to go, what is my goal. So I need to have a clear goal set up in terms of, let's say I want to have better relationships with my employees, or I want to have more innovative people in my organization. Whatever the goal is, kind of set up that goal. Second thing, what they can do is integrate, is start connecting with people. Once you start connecting with people, you kind of showcase that they are important to you. And not just by sending a message or sending an email, it has to be hands on. It has to be one on one. It has to be connected. Of course, sometimes you cannot go meet people one on one, but somewhere you can make yourself present where people can connect with you. When you find that connect, you find a holistic approach. You find that people who are working with you are on the same page as you. When they're working with you, they're on the same frequency, emotionally, mentally, goal wise, vision wise. When employees understand that they are given self-worth, they are given respect, they're given the same kind of understanding, they kind of put in more work in that. In any team, any organization, any production line, any supply chain, does not matter. When I feel important, when I feel as a part of the whole big project, I will do my duty very well because it is mine then. And that's my growth. And when leaders start kind of understanding this, these small aspects will actually help them become spiritually more aware, or get into spiritual leadership. It will be a holistic approach, starting from yourself, understanding the goal. Tactically, I'm telling you, stop and think what is going wrong. And if it's something is going wrong, what is it that's going wrong? How can they improve? What are the gaps? How can the gaps be filled? Can be through individual practices like breathing, meditation, healing, therapy, emotional understanding, all of that, and then getting people involved in it. And looking at the whole thing as a bigger picture. So no leader who is spiritually aware or spiritually strong is an individual only person. He's a holistic person. Holistic, I mean, in a way, it's a universal person. It's one for all and all for one. When you have changed that mindset, then you will, and those are successful people, absolutely successful, because you're not thinking for yourself. If you succeed, I succeed. If I succeed, we all succeed. When that thought process shifts, then a spiritual leadership will really thrive.
Great. So Dr. Veeraswamy is asking, how do you maintain happy situations through visualization techniques? You've spoken about breathing and mindfulness, but are there any visualization techniques that you...
Absolutely. There are a lot of techniques that you can, as an individual, you can use. Visualization techniques are a fantastic tool to have. He's asking for how you can actually use that technique.
So what are some of the visualization techniques and how would you use them? Yeah.
Okay. So there are, like I said, there are multiple ways of visualizing something. You can visualize progressively future. You can visualize today. You can visualize your past. So what you probably can do is one of the techniques that you can use for visualization is find a space, sit down, close your eyes, and think exactly what you want, how you want to be. Now there are different techniques to this. You can think of what you want to become, completely picturize it, and then shift your energy on that frequency. Now, there has to be very detailed visualization about that thing. So you can picture, and it can be like a motion picture. So you can start seeing a motion picture of how does it sound, what is the smell, how does it feel. All of those things can be taken in consideration when you're visualizing something. Another way of visualizing is when you sit down and you want to uncover something. Let's say you want to uncover your emotions. For that, you can sit down and start visualizing, let's say, like a bookshelf, if you want. You can visualize whatever you want. It's your mind, right? So you can visualize a bookshelf or just like a box where you kind of pick up the chits from. And you take out one and you see, and whatever will open will be your subconscious talking to you. So you open and you really see. If it says fear, then you start visualizing the fear. Where do you feel that fear in your body? Body scanning with visualization can be used. Which part of the body really feels like that? Then you start slowly understanding and seeing the whole picture of what that fear is, where did it come from. Then you can see characters coming in. That kind of a visualization can be used. Another visualization technique is just to calm yourself down. So that is the sacred space or the pause that you want to use. You can use visualization techniques there. Over there, what you can do is the best place that you want to go to, whichever place you might have visited, not visited, probably seen on some series or movie, whatever it is, get yourself there in the mind and be present as if you're actually there and start experiencing that place. You start visualizing that place, making that place as real as you can. It is not hallucination, it's making it visual in your mind. Creating the smell, the space, the weather, the temperature, the leaves, all of that. Now, what that will do is it will calm your nerves down because it's going to teleport you from where you are to somewhere else. Right? So that kind of visual practices can be used. There are many more other visual practices that can be used for different areas and different things that you want to do. I'll be happy to share them if you want in detail. In particular one, I'll be happy to share them.
Do you have a favorite that you would recommend, or do you think it's very context-based and driven?
No, it is context-based, but one of my favorite ones is sitting on an extreme amount of mount. There's the tallest mountain that can be, and on the tip, just sitting on the tip. It's to create a balance between, we work with a lot of energy, so between your masculine and feminine energy, because you're sitting on the top, right, on the Bindu. When you're sitting, when you're sitting on the top, the point of it, you have to be very centered. And that is where I like to visualize when I do a visual breathing, coming down place where I like to go is on the mountaintop, just one point. you're balancing yourself, and the whole aspect of you becoming one and balancing comes over there. So you kind of, and that's my favorite place to visualize, and with a lot of other things happening around.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
Do you think practicing habits like gratitude, kindness, empathy help in relieving unnecessary stress, and do they lead to better mental health?
A quick answer, yes. A twisted answer, but you need to know where the stress is coming from. So they will help you 110%, because it's like changing your mental frequency to something. So when I forgive somebody, I'm releasing that excess baggage that I have. Right? So I'm shifting from point A to point B. Now, if somebody wants to reach out to me on point A, I will not be available there. And hence, if somebody does want to reach, he or she needs to reach on point B. So when I shift my frequency, when I shift my thought process with gratitude, with empathy, with compassion, with all of those things that he's mentioned, things will change for me. Stress will become lesser for me, because it will slowly, you care, but it stops mattering. Because you kind of, then when you repeat something, it's like neuroprogramming. When you program continuously yourself with gratitude, with forgiveness, then it stops bothering you. And the minute it stops bothering you, the stress level will reduce. The stress is there because it's bothering you. Having said that, you still need to understand where that stress was actually coming from, because that stress can then come up like a fountain from somewhere else, like a jack in the box. Something else can trigger. Maybe that aspect may not trigger. Maybe something randomly different might trigger that. And so that trigger should not happen. That, you used to have as a child, we used to have these jack in the box thing and gems. We used to have these boxes. It will pop up at some point in time. For you to understand where it's going to pop up, you need to understand where the root cause of your stresses are. But that's why your answer to your question is yes, and a twisted one.
So, I mean, if I'm understanding sort of the thread that you have going here, it starts with these mindful techniques like breathing, which sort of help you realize what is in your control and what is not in your control, right? And then once you realize what is in your control, you can figure out how you engage with these things, and that you're not in competition with the outside world, and you're kind of on this path of self-improvement, and then you're kind of engaging as a team, and then you don't feel the pressures, or you're able to better deal with the pressures that
yes. But the thing is, when we say what I think a couple of things we need to understand is release the baggage, because excess weight of thoughts and expectations are there. That uncertainties, with what you can control, what you cannot control, I don't think you can really control much of things. You have to play the cards that you're dealt. It's just that how you play changes, how you respond to something changes. So it's a very crucial thing, very simple, but uncertainties are the only certain aspect of your life. Something is something or the other is COVID. Absolutely. We did not know how to deal with it. The whole world tried to figure it out. So things will happen. And that is the certainty of life. And that's a certainty for business, a team, or people, or individual, or a family, wherever. Anything can happen. But if you're rooted, if you're anchored, you will know how to deal with it. And the only way you can deal with something is if you really are grounded. So those things are very important. What you can control, how much you can control, and what you need to let go. I think the trick is where to stop, not how much to do.
And this where to stop is applicable for everybody, whether you're, the leader of an organization or somebody who's working in a team.
Everything. We should know when to stop. We have to, and every individual needs to know in every areas of our life where to give it a pause and how much to do. So the trick is usually not in how much we can do, but every battle is not to be fought. You should know which battle to fight and which battle to let go of. because it's not worth your energy, time, investments that you're doing, period. Half of your issues, your stresses will go off because your competition is so high. Your stresses are high because of your competition and because you don't know when to stop. So I think that's one of the areas that I think people should look at. Then it may be leader, maybe team manager, maybe team leader. It can be anybody. As an individual, even as a student, we need to know when to stop. Can be any area of life.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So Deepali asks, and I think you've sort of covered this, but I'll read it out in case there's anything additional you want to add to it. What role does emotional intelligence play in effective leadership within organizations?
Yes, I have answered this question before, but just to give you a quick, just a quick understanding of that. Emotional leadership, emotional intelligence is knowing yourself, understanding your emotions, hence being able to manage them, and hence being able to manage somebody else's. So when you're a leader, you're not just working with yourself, you're working with everybody involved in an organization. You have a lot of responsibility. You cannot be biased. You cannot have a preconceived notion. You cannot have favoritism. Typically in a leadership role, you should not be having a favoritism. When you are aware emotionally and you understand how things are working across with a nice flavor of spiritual awareness in yourself, a leader will be able to, it will help a leader become a better leader.
Perfect. So Dr. Mamta is asking, how do you manage demands which are unrealistic and maintain that balance? And sometimes without enough resources, tasks are assigned by the leader. How do you as an individual handle that? And I'm assuming this is a situation where you don't have control over that. How do you handle it?
Correct. So her first part of her question was, how do you handle
unrealistic demands?
Unrealistic demands. Okay, so the base again begins with knowing yourself. I always say this, it's very important. Then setting up boundaries. There are certain things that you can do, there are certain things you should do, certain things you cannot do. And the reason we don't set our boundaries is because of, again, insecurity and fear. Because if I don't do it, somebody else will do it and they'll be a better position than I am. So if we cannot set our boundaries and tell what is possible, the help is always there. We don't ask for help. So if we set our boundaries right, if we tell, and in terms of, without resources, if you're assigned tasks, and that happens in a lot of corporates, when you're under pressure, you're assigned a lot of tasks which you do not know how to handle because you don't have the resources to do it. People resources, information resources, technology resources, whatever it is. If you are in a situation like that, I think first thing is to anchor and understand the situation as to what is happening without reacting to it. Okay, step back, see the situation, see the whole thing, what is really happening. Then you talk to whoever is concerned with compassion, with empathy, explaining your situation very correctly. Most often than not, your problem gets resolved like that. If not, unfortunately, in today's world, you probably will have to deal with that situation. But even if you're put in that situation where you cannot deal with it, learn to remain calm and push yourself outside the picture of what is happening. So specifically for this example, again, easier said than done. It's out of practice. You need to take out your character as an individual out of that motion picture. The person who's doing it is doing it, but do not let that situation affect your mental and emotional stability. So you're going to just behave as if you're acting in that drama, doing that role without the resources possible, doing the best that you can, but it's not yours to take. Do not let that hamper your mental stability or emotional stability, or do not let it put you down as I could not do enough, or it was my failure. For that, you need to understand the situation very clearly, explain the situation, and then step out. You still might have to do it, but emotionally and mentally, you're stepping out of that situation and doing your job because it's what you've got to do, but without being attached to the result of that job. Like I said, it's easier said than done, but it's out of practice.
I think our last couple of questions and comments I'm going to read out for you for this
Sure.
session are from Tarun Kohli, who says, maybe staying away from gadgets helps to cut off. Too much noise and fear of missing out is creating more stress. And the other question that came in a little earlier is, shouldn't these concepts be taught at the school level? Is it too
Bindu.
late to introduce such concepts once a person comes to join the workforce? What is your opinion on this? And since we're
Can
looking
I
at
answer that
young
question?
leaders, this is, I guess, the right question to ask and the right way to kind of
Can
wrap
I
this.
answer that question quickly?
Yeah.
Yes, it is important to teach in schools, and we are really trying very hard to introduce our things. We used to have something called as moral science, and like 40 years back in school. I don't think we have that anymore. We used to have breathing exercises in school before. We don't have that anymore. We're trying to reintroduce our own culture back into our schools. It's becoming very difficult, but I think it's important to teach in schools and in corporates. It's for newcomers who are joining in. It's a very good thing to start, but like I always say, children can be taught, but parents have to be taught first. So who's already, because your company culture, organization culture is by the people who are already there. The one who's coming in is actually blending into that culture that's already there. So the mother organization has to have some changes, and then of course, when you come in, you can always introduce these aspects. Because you can have a manager who is not on that mind frame, but you can have employees coming in who are freshers integrating these aspects, but then they will clash. So I hope I answered that question. I took the
Absolutely.
liberty to answer that question. Sorry.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. Thank you for taking the time and being with us here today. I think there are a lot of insights and a lot of engagement from the audience, which is always a sign that people are enjoying what's happening. On behalf of AIMA YLC, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who attended this session. And we look forward to seeing you at the next session as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being so kind with questions. Thank you so much.